Look, this is the last item, for us to discuss, and it's the investment in Tamaki Makaurau sports sector. And look, just to open up, I will be moving this as Chair's recommendations, and Councillor Henderson will second it. And just to give you some background, Dave, to you, to Mason and the team, and Samantha especially in regards to this, thank you so much in regards about what we have in front of us. As I've sort of let everybody inform that there was quite a bit of conversation, and for us, I think it's just to sort of for this particular year, as in just to have the status quo for this particular year. And then what we'll end up doing is for the GM to facilitate a meeting with Active, with kia ora, Mace, with Active, with our RSTs, and really the end game is to have a look at getting or putting in place a multi-year funding, so then people have surety around funding that are going to them. So look, I just want to acknowledge Mace as well. I didn't know they'd come in, but kia ora. Yeah, it's good that we've got to this stage. So it's been moved in second. Also, there's a note in there that there's an interest in this item. However, the meeting agreed there was no conflict for Councillor Collins. And yep, and Councillor Collins, if you want to declare that, at least we've noted it as on the agenda.
Yes, please. Thanks, Chair.
Kia ora. So look, those are the Chair's recommendations. I'm just going to put on the table first for discussion.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask about the drafting in A, which was also in the recommendation of that full stop in the A, that if I'm seeing it correctly, an offending full stop just needs to be connected with a word, because is it subject to or following, or because to break it into it with a full stop is a separate resolution? Just being a little bit drafting picky, but yeah, that would just clarify exactly what that's intended to mean.
So it's been noted for now, and I have no doubt at all that the people on my right and behind me are looking at it now, and yep, and they'll come back with an answer. I'm just giving Dave and Mason an opportunity just to sort of explain in regards to where we're settled now. But I will get Samantha or mind them to wordsmith it. Kia ora. Dave, I'll leave that to you. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou.
Sorry. There's a point of order that has been mentioned by Matua Kake, so I have to go to the point of order. So Matua Kake.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I should have raised it right at the start. So I have a contract with Sport Auckland, so I think I should kind of just in all clarity and transparency purposes just bow out at this stage, bro. That's all.
No, ka pai. That will be noted as well. Matua kake, so na kia ora na, ka kite anō.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ka pai.
Maya, I wonder, presentation, thank you. Fantastic. So we're talking about the investment into Tamaki Makaurau's sports sector today, in particular our investment into Active and the Regional Sports Trust Network. But I thought just as we went into that, I'd provide a little bit of background about Auckland Council's, I guess, overall investment story into the sport and recreation sector. We invest in a number of different ways in which this is part of that overall story. So we invest through various funds that we have, including the Facility Investment Fund, which supports the sector to develop new facilities in partnership with Council, operating fund into sport and recreation facilities, programming fund to be able to enable sport and recreation organisations to deliver activities to their local communities, alongside obviously the really significant portfolio of assets and facilities that Auckland Council provides to the sector. So it's a big investment area that we have. This particular investment that we're talking about today is $552,000 that's budgeted through the long-term plan and really plays into our delivery of the Auckland Sport and Recreation Strategic Action Plan section around sector development. So this is how we support, I guess, high-functioning sport and recreation organisations across the rohi and making sure that we're supporting, I guess, the best possible outcomes being delivered by organisations to be able to enable participation further down the chain. So this is where our regional sports trusts, including Active, Sport Auckland, Harbour Sport, Sport Waitakere and CLM Community Sport play a really important role in terms of the development of the sector and really supporting the 1,500 or so sport and recreation organisations that we have around the region really deliver quality outcomes for their communities. So there's three options that I provided through the paper, noting the Chair's recommendation that's come through. So the three options were option one, status quo. So that was basically continuing the existing investment levels that we had into the group from the financial year 22 decision that was made 12 months or so ago. And that was a slight adjustment on previous levels as well, reflecting a decreased level of investment into Active from 76,000 down to 40, with the remainder of that investment being distributed around the four other organisations, the regional sports trusts. Option two was around looking at a recalibrated investment into the group to be able to best enable delivery on regional strategy. And option three was around looking elsewhere to consider who else might be able to support Auckland Council in the delivery of sector development outcomes. This was taken to a workshop of PACE Committee in June of this year for us to have a look at that and a discussion around it, and we received advice around option two being something that you would like further exploration around. So this folded into my recommendation for this this investment stream for financial year 23, so from now through to June 2023, noting again the Chair's recommendation, but essentially it was around that reallocation of the $552,000 with a base level of investment into all five organisations of $100,000 in order to support human resource fundamentally, so in order to support staff within those organisations to work with their sector partners in order to develop sector development opportunities and outcomes within their area and for Active across the entire region with regional sports organisations in particular. The final element of that recommendation was around a $52,000 fund that was available for that group and the collective to be able to draw down upon for any costs involved in the delivery of those work streams, whether that be the development of resources, being able to help fund speakers to come in and talk to sports organisations, so I guess experts within different functional areas, and also being able to put on costs around forums and whatnot. So that was available to the entire group of five to be able to draw down upon, with the intent that the five people that we were funding through this would work together as a collective to be able to, I guess, leverage strengths and opportunities to work across the entire region. So the drivers behind the recommendation were based on a couple of key areas. The first of all was accountability, so really showing a line of sight between the investment that Auckland Council was putting into the group, how the funds were to be expended, and making sure that they were clearly targeted towards those sector development areas, the building of capability within sport and recreation organisations. And the second part of it was around regional impact. So obviously this was funding a group of five staff spread across the five organisations, so an intent for them to be able to work together collaboratively on the development of good practice and tools, approaches to be able to build sector capability, obviously with the customisation and delivery appropriate for the local communities that those organisations are working within, but really trying to build an overall sector approach across Tamaki Makaurau. And also in terms of the the higher level of investment back into active, again, so they could also employ someone in this space and be working into those regional sports organisations that then work down into the clubs and local organisations as well. So I guess an approach that touched on all levels of the sport and recreation sector in Auckland. So I had done some analysis around the options, so a nice colourful little chart there just to show, I guess, where I thought the strengths and weaknesses were. And again, noting the Chair's resolution is slightly different to the proposal there, but you can see that in the paper. So that was my brief presentation. I'm happy to take part.
Oh boy. At the moment, just Councillor Dalton. Kia ora, Councillor Dalton.
Kia ora. Could I please see the Chair's recs again?
Councillor Dalton, do you want me to explain what the Chair's recs are?
Well, actually, actually, specifically, I have a couple of questions for Dave. One is just clarify for me again. I can see it's off the table, but the $100,000 for regional sector development, can you just expand on that a bit?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Dalton. Yes, so I can talk about that. So again, that was intended to, like with the 4 other organisations, be able to support a human resource within Active to be able to do that work. In terms of the organisations that they would work with on that, would be the organisations that have a sort of broader mandate across the entirety of the region. So there's a number of codes that have regional sports organisations that reach across the entirety of Tamaki Makaurau, rather than, say, some of the regional sports organisations are, say, devoted to North Harbour or Counties Manukau. So the ones that reach across the boundaries of the other regional sports organisations, part of what we would be looking for from them as well is to tap into other knowledge bases around what good practice looks like, the development of tools to be deployed regionally, and certainly working across the entirety of the region alongside their colleagues from those other 4 organisations.
Thank you. My second question was the last point on your slide, that resource within, I think you said the RSTs, that would be helping to build capacity and capability for organisations. My understanding is that is what the RSTs do now, is do that capacity building piece of work. Is this a new role, or would this have been a new role?
Yeah, kia ora, Councillor Dalton. So yes, broadly, this is a key function of what regional sports trusts do. What this is I guess, an investment into the elements of sector development that aren't funded through other sources at the moment. So Sport New Zealand, for example, their investment is targeted into different sort of functional areas within that sector development, the capability area. For example, they work in areas like spaces and places, so the knowledge and intelligence around how new facilities should be developed, or insights and data, making sure that organisations have the skills to be able to support their community groups around those particular areas. This is about, I guess, things like governance, things like good practice around appointment of staff. We invested into things like diversity and inclusion in the last financial year, so training around how to keep, child safeguarding, making sure that organisations had appropriate policies in place for, I guess, protection of all participants, regardless of their background. So there's, I guess, a sweet spot within the investment portfolio that comes through into these organisations that this was honing in on.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. Just a quick question from me. How do we know the extent of the partners' collaboration? Do we have any visibility on the collective action that different RSTs are doing with each other?
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. So we have a variety of different ways of seeing the level of collaboration that is happening between the organisations. The mechanisms that has been occurring through has sort of been changing a little bit over time, and certainly there's an increased role for collaboration, especially around this particular investment stream. So that was part of the recommendation of investment into each of those organisations, to have a person there. You'll note through the paper that there's an intent that they would be working together on the overall program of sector development and capability build that they would be doing. So a strong intent for them to work together, and that combined $52,000 fund for them to draw down upon. So that was, I guess, an intent around the council investment component, making sure that there was a strong collaboration between the organisations on this functional area. In regards to other functional areas, there's some working groups that have been developed around priority areas that have been confirmed through the Auckland Sport and Recreation Strategic Action Plan, such as a women and girls working group and things like that. However, there's probably opportunity for increasing levels of collaboration across the group as an entirety of a work program between them.
Well, thank you.
Matua Wilcox, and there's nobody indicated in the sidebar if they have any kia ora. Matua.
If we can go back to paragraph 11, I think it is on your kaupapa there. The paragraph 11. Mr. Chair. Is that possible? Sorry.
Is that number 11 on the actual agenda, Matua?
Yeah, no, paragraph 11.
What's that? Yeah, but I think he wants it on the screen. Matua, did you want the number 11 in the agenda on the screen?
I'm having trouble reading my screen.
Is there apartheid to Dave around number 11?
Yeah, and it's concerning the kaupapa that you've written there, monitoring. How are you going to monitor Māori involvement, and especially tamariki occurring, as you said, in certain areas? How are we going to influence that? So there's a two-part question.
Kia ora, Member Wilcox. So there's probably a number of ways through which we will do that. The first of all is through the development of a funding agreement. There'll be KPIs in terms of how the program of investment should be targeted, and what the achievable, what the deliverables should be back against the funding agreement that we have there. In terms of Maori outcomes. So we, in the last financial year, certainly we had asked for prioritisation of engagement with Maori sport and recreation organisations, and you'll be able to see some of that within the reporting back on our last funding agreement as the attachment A. In terms of how we will do that, there's probably a couple of ways, noting again that the slight difference with the Chair's recommendation. But with the $52,000 fund that was be drawn down upon, we would be able to, I guess, monitor the different activities that would be going to. And certainly within Active, with their Heronga Patama team, a strong engagement that they could have within the Māori sport and recreation community to make sure that the funding was being directed to areas of greatest need. So there's probably a number of pieces to that answer. Have I answered the question for you? Apologies.
Yeah, you have, in a way. I suppose what I'm looking for is that we do have those key indicators that we can monitor with, because engagement is one thing, but actually I want to see kids out there, and I think that's my concern, is that we have engagement but we don't actually put any meat on the bone. So that's very easy to do with Māori kaupapa. So I'd like to think that we can say you'll engage, but also you'll actually actively get something happening, if that makes sense.
Kia ora, Member Wilcox. Just to finish that off, I guess. So absolutely, through our KPIs and the operational funding agreement, we'll certainly have deliverables that we would expect the group to achieve. And whilst I do note your point around the actually seeing tamariki and rangatahi out there participating, this is around the capability work into those organisations. So I guess it's about identifying the organisations that can have a really significant impact within this area and making sure that we're investing into them so that they can support their communities to participate. So it's a little bit of a downstream impact, but this is sort of looking at the leading indicators of really strong organisations to be able to deliver that long-term change in terms of participation rates that we have data about through various sources, including the Sport New Zealand Insights and the Active New Zealand Survey.
Thank you.
Goodbye. So with the Chair's recommendations A and B, they've been moved and seconded. The first one, obviously, A is status quo. And that allows the RSTs, at least in regards to their upcoming budget, and that's only for the year, as been indicated. The second Chair's recommendation is the fact that there be a facilitation, at least in the meeting of those that are listed in B, so then we can have a look at multi-year funding, because it's important that for sustainability, etc., for our RSTs, for active, and especially I think for our community, that there is sustainability at least for 3 years. So that's why, and I just want to acknowledge again the councillors who had contacted me, but also we've had the conversation with, and also Dave, to you, Mason and Samantha and the team in regards to where we've settled for now. But I look forward to next year. So if there's any, I'm just going to open it up for any whakaaro. Councillor Coombe.
Oh, tēnā koe. Just a very quick comment. I will support this. I must admit that I would have preferred us to go with the officer recommendation and do take their advice on this. And I do want to just acknowledge the work of Jenna at Active, because it's just great to hear about how she has been making so much progress with building relationships and working for the sector. So it would have been my preference that we push forward, but I do take your lead on this, Matua, and that this is just an interim step, and perhaps this will provide a foundation for a more sustainable funding going forward, and everybody can continue that relationship building at the same time. So kia ora, thank you, and thanks to the team for this work. Thanks.
Kapai. I think it boiled down to numbers game. Councillor Dalton, followed by Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I think that Jenna gave us a really good presentation this morning, and I have a lot more confidence in Active under her leadership. I liked how she explained she is really getting down to understanding what's going on around the region, but also down even below the RST level, perhaps. I admire the way that she has rebuilt the relationship with CMS. That's really important. They continue to work well in our community, and it's not without the struggles that they have faced with Active in the past. That's a very healthy relationship. I too was quite intrigued by the original officer recommendation and have some sympathy for supporting that, because our clubs are struggling under capacity and capability, more capacity perhaps, because we've been run by volunteers and people are tired. We need to understand what our clubs need to be able to survive, to continue to have our kids in sport more active, more often. But happy to go I will support your chairs, Rex, for this, and perhaps in this year we can really find out with what those capacity roles are like within our sports clubs out there, not just the RSTs. My experience, of course, is only working with CMS, and they were doing capacity building within the clubs and still have concerns in that space as well. So I'm happy to support this and happy with Jenna. Thank you, Chair.
Ka pai. Councillor Newman, and then if there's no further, I'll close.
Oh, look, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the officers. I do want to acknowledge Jenna, and I too having observed, I think, something of a renaissance of the relationship between Active and their delivery partners, as well as reflecting on Jenna's presentation this morning. I think it's a vastly different type of climate than it was some years ago, and that's very positive. It gives me greater scope for feeling optimistic about Active's role. But I also acknowledge you, Chair, and you've certainly been at the forefront of trying to ensure that the regional sports trusts are in a good position, that they are in a strong position, and that their vital role is acknowledged and supported, and that's very important. So I do want to acknowledge you, Chair. I think it is the case that a lot of our sports clubs do struggle. I mean, I've got another role which allows me to be able to work with a lot of those clubs, and yeah, there are capacity constraints, and the resourcing that has to go in to support those clubs is substantial, and it will be ongoing. We're working to try and do that, but it remains a challenge. Whether the officer's proposal, the initial recommendation, would have significantly addressed that gap, I'm not sure. But there is no doubt that the key thing here is to ensure that tired volunteers receive the support and that the funding comes with it. It's one thing to advise and to mentor, but the funding needs to be unlocked. How that happens, Chair, is a matter that continues to be a matter for some discussion. I think that the discussion that you've mooted is an important one. I would like to see the delivery partners include a direct relationship between Active and Counties Manukau Sport. That is an important objective for me. But I do want to acknowledge you, Chair. I think that you have facilitated this well, and I do support this.
Kia ora, thank you. Councillor Hills and then Councillor Watson.
Kia ora, Alf. And I agree with what everyone's saying, but it is a bit confusing that everyone's saying we support Jenna and the move she's made and Active's move in the last 2 years from where they were to where they are now, but then keeping the status quo. It does sound a bit confusing that we kind of agree with the officer's recommendations, but then the recommendations we disagree with. So I just, for if we truly want the regional approach and the regional work happening from Active and the support from Jenna and the team, I think going forward we need to be clearer about what that looks like, and if that's increasing this fund overall to ensure the RSTs across the city have equitable funding, but also Active has the mandate and the funding to do the regional work, that would make more sense, because I think we're sending some confusing signals, that's all, on this. So it's good that there's support there for Active, but I think the problems in the past seem to have been resolved, but we're kind of treating it like it hasn't necessarily been resolved. So I just think we need to ensure, or the next council needs to ensure that it's very clear, because I think it's a bit of a confusing message. So it sounds like this is well supported across the council table, but I think in hindsight, potentially looking at a request to increase the overall funding so everything we're asking everyone to do can fit within the budget. So thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor Watson.
Yeah, just very quickly, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to echo the sentiments of Councillor Newman in respect of your leadership and direction here. I agree absolutely with them, and I think that's that's a sensible and productive way to go forward in terms of some of the other issues that remain unresolved. So that's great to see. Thank you for that. I'd also just like to acknowledge the regional sports trusts, and I speak from the experience of Harbour Sport for the huge amount of work that they do on the ground, and and often quite difficult circumstances. They deliver the programs. They're the ones, the foot soldiers out there interacting with our community. They've got some excellent personnel leading those organisations and their staff. So my starting point is always backing them to the hilt, and especially in a time where we have a real challenge with getting people more physically active. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I think a very sensible way forward today awaits in these resolutions. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. There's no further whakaaro, so I'm just going to close the debate. Look, the reason this has happened, because I will always, as chair, I will always support the officers in regards to any of the recommendation, as I said in 2019, with the staff, it's based on evidence. And in this particular case, even though the evidence is there, what's happened is that with the calls that I have received since the agenda was printed, and as the chair, the numbers weren't there in regards to the 100,000, several factors. And these factors were relayed to me by members of the committee. One is that a lot of the RSTs had already factored in the monies from last year into their budget. And then why all of a sudden we end up seeing that there's 100,000 going to active. I've got no issues in regards to the work that Jenna and Active are doing. Why is because when we did that, when we made that decision around that $40,000 that Jenna got through Active, around it, it was just up to Jenna, but just to give the evidence in regards to the previous amount, which was 76,000. And from some of the RSTs and councillors, when that was happening, there was no transparency. We do have transparency around the 40,000, but at the moment, if it's not going to go through, and that's the indication I got, I'm not going to put our staff by putting recommendation up that I know will not end up going through, and to find a compromise. That's the role of the chair and the deputy chairs, to find a compromise. And we found this compromise. Why? Because for a year, this will end up happening. It's sustainable for our RSTs and Active at this stage, and that kōrero, the conversation that they're going to have in regards to B, is going to set hopefully a positive platform where we end up getting multi-funding. Yeah, I mean, that's even better. And Dave, you said that in the report, around 3 years. I mean, that is so much better for all those concerned. So that's why I worked with it. And again, I said this before, but Dave, thank you to you, to Mace, to Samantha and the team in regards to where we are at now. So I'm going to put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you all. Look, thank you, everybody. Thanks, my mate at the back. Thank you for the live stream. Thank you, team. There's still quite a bit of cake left, so let's get a cup of coffee and a cup of tea and just eat all the cake. Thank you, team. Thank you, committee. So, and especially Kalinda, this may be your last committee. If it is, if you could put in and let Waka Kotahi coming back, that would be great. And Maya, as always, thank you. Kia ora nā. Ngā mihi kia koutou katoa.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. See yous.
Thanks,
Kia ora.
Thanks, Chair.
See ya.
Thank you.
Ka kite.
Thank you.